Hey everyone, Jim Coventry from RotoWire here. I normally take off Thursdays and Fridays from filming, so we are back. This recording is of Saturday morning, August 6th. We're going to go over some tidbits of news and notes from the last couple of days and give you that fantasy football perspective to help you make the best decisions in your fantasy football drafts. Let's start out with the news of Elijah Mitchell. Beat reporter Nick Wagner says that Mitchell continues to look like the clear-cut number one. He is going in fantasy drafts last 3 days per fantasymojo.com. High stakes drafts, running back 24. I do think there's a market inefficiency here. I think a lot of people felt last year Mitchell being a 6th round pick. I don't think people are buying into him. This was a player I was very high on before the NFL draft. I thought his measurables were outstanding. I thought they definitely translated on the field when he played last year. You'll hear me frequently say the Kyle Shanahan system that he uses for the run game. The running back is expected to begin his run and make a cut before the hole opens on the line with the expectation that that hole will be there when he gets there. Shanahan continuously praised Mitchell for understanding that and being outstanding in that facet, which is why he wanted him on the field. So now we hear the training camp talk. Ty Davis Price gets drafted. We know Trey Sermon was a 3rd round pick. We know he busted last year, but people still believe in those early round draft choices. And I think people think Mitchell is going to be in this big committee, whereas almost everybody is an A committee. Mitchell is going to be the lead back here. Mitchell is outstanding. Now, he missed time last year. I get it. 6 games he missed with varying injuries. Now, Mitchell said he put on some weight to make it through the rigors of the NFL season. I believe that he did do that because that's an understanding as a professional of what you do. Now, that said, here's the biggest advantage of Mitchell. And even if he doesn't get 20 to 25 carries like he was getting in some games last year, if he gets 15, 18, let me explain the difference this year. Last year, Jimmy Garoppolo was the quarterback. We know Jimmy's not mobile. So Jimmy does not bring a dynamic element into that run game to freeze the backside linebacker. Trey Lance will terrify defenses because of his ability to take the ball back from the running back, cut back behind the play, and have a lot of open space. You must, as a defense, respect the crazy athletic ability of that quarterback. What that does for Mitchell is, last year, Mitchell was making all the right cuts, all the right moves, but defenders were there to stop him before he got deep to the second level. This year, that second level is going to be open regularly for Mitchell. Mitchell is a 4.33 runner with game-breaking ability. Elijah Mitchell, people are sleeping on him. I'm telling you, draft him in the late 4th, the early 5th round. He could be your RB1 this year. Again, he doesn't need 25 carries a game to do that. Okay, next, and I do have the phone on somewhere. Sorry. All right, Mike Evans is next. Possible hamstring injury for Mike Evans. I don't think at this point we're worried. We know a couple of years ago down the stretch, he had a hamstring injury, which was problematic. But that said, Mike Evans has been pretty much an Iron Man on the field. I think what we need to consider here, and Mike Evans is being drafted as the wide receiver 8, and I think that makes sense. We still don't know with Chris Godwin's full readiness will be. We'll talk about him in a minute. But you see, Mike Evans barely has cracked 1,000 yards in the last 2 seasons. He had 1,006, 1,035, and 4.5 yards on receptions, 4.5 receptions per game last year. So he doesn't get a ton of catches. But here's what I want to talk about. He's had 13 and 14 touchdowns, and we expect that those could continue, and those drive his fantasy value. There are very few players better in the red zone than Mike Evans. Tom Brady knows that he needs to go that way. And with Gronk gone, I think that expectation is there. But I want fantasy managers to consider this, and I still love Mike Evans. Julio Jones, he is healthy right now. The Buccaneers, as I've talked about, they are a smart franchise that are playing for a championship. I believe Julio Jones will see limited snaps. Those snaps will come when they are needed most. He will be used in the red zone a lot. Now, Tom Brady, obviously the smartest processor in the game. He'll still go to Mike Evans. But remember all those years Julio wasn't scoring touchdowns? Well, here was the deal. Julio was getting bracketed in the red zone, and Matt Ryan was the quarterback that said, you know what? He's bracketed. I've got Calvin Ridley, or I've got a tight end open, and I'm going to take the easy throw and get the touchdown. He wouldn't force the ball to Julio. He could have. Well, Mike Evans is going to be drawing the heavier coverage in the red zone, and now it's going to be Julio who will physically dominate any of the players who will defend him, and that's going to be the deal. Tom Brady's going to see Julio, and it's not always going to him. But maybe instead of 14 and 13 touchdowns for Evans, we see 9 or 10, and Julio picks up a good chunk of those red zone looks. Just food for thought. Evans is still a great fantasy pick where he's going, but I think if Godwin comes out healthier than we thought, we're counting on a big target share for Mike Evans, and that target share may be the same as it was last year. So I think that the upside many are hoping for, it could be there. But I think, and you need to understand as a fantasy manager, there is some risk with that. And let's talk about Chris Godwin now. Todd Bowles, although Godwin returned to practice on Friday, amazing after that late ACL injury, Bowles is not getting his hopes up. Long way to go, according to Bowles, for him to be ready. Now, Godwin has missed 3, 4, and 2 games over the last 3 seasons. He has that heavily discounted price as wide receiver 30. We know if he's fully healthy, we're looking at him as a top 15 option. So the discount is there. But he's playing with a brace on his knee. And look, I'm injury agnostic. If he's ready, he's ready. Don't forget, though, Godwin plays a lot of slot, and that slot is very highly dependent upon hard cuts, quick cuts, and that could be the ACL. I'm just turning this phone down a minute here. All right, so I think that's important to understand. So we're not quite sure what Godwin's got going. We're not sure how close to 100% he is, but if he's not that hard breaking, quick cut guy in the slot, his upside isn't what we think it was. So again, take your risk on Godwin if you like, but just understand, and I love Chris Godwin, one of my favorite players in the game, but I think there are plenty of scenarios where he's good, but he's not great. And if he misses time, you may, if you're drafting him as a wide receiver 3, you better get stacked at receiver to have that, that backup when you need it. Matthew Stafford's next. So apparently he's dealing with some elbow tendonitis. He's going off the board as quarterback 12. So they have time to deal with this. Now, if it's actually tendonitis comes and goes. Being an older dude myself that played a lot of sports, I did have elbow tendonitis. It showed up at the worst possible times. But Matthew Stafford obviously will have elite trainers. They will definitely do everything they can medically and from a physical therapy standpoint to get him ready. Personally, I'm not lowering on my draft board based on this news. There could be risk. So again, I bring this out to fantasy managers, but I think this is one of those things during camp. I think it'll get blown out of proportion more than it needs to be. I won't be, tendonitis is typically not structural. And so I think that Stafford will be able to play through this, and I think they'll have him ready to go on game day for this. So again, you might get a discount. His fantasy value might drop a bit. And of course, he's tied to those great receivers, Cooper Kupp and Allen Robinson. So if you're personally worried about Stafford's elbow, then I think you have to downgrade those receivers, because I'm not. I'm still staying in where I am, especially on Allen Robinson. We know Cooper Kupp is sitting near the top of everybody's draft board. Brandon Ayuk is next. In the spring practices, Kyle Shanahan complained again about his work. And last year, we know it led to him like the first 6 games or so. Ayuk was in the doghouse. There were games his snaps were severely cut, his targets were cut, and then he went on and finished pretty strong. He had 8 games with at least 60 yards and including the playoffs. So on his last 13, 8 of his last 13 games, 60 or more yards. So he was really tearing it up. He's at a very good pace for where you're getting him, right? So now, apparently, he worked a lot with Trey Lance in the offseason. Ayuk is a very good contested ball receiver. And, honestly, with Trey Lance that may be a really good fit. Brandon Ayuk is not going to be a wide receiver 1. He may not be a wide receiver 2, but you're getting him later in fantasy drafts. You're getting him in the 90s or so. And there is a value there. And I know this is a run-based offense. They're not going to throw a ton. So, but that said, Brandon Ayuk, where he's going in drafts, if you're getting him as a low-end wide receiver 3, a flex, I think he's a great buy right now. He'll have hit or miss, right? Because there'll be games when they run too much, but nonetheless, I think he's a great buy in fantasy drafts. People are looking at his full season numbers, disappointed, worried about Trey Lance. I think overall, Brandon Ayuk is a great selection. A couple more pieces here. Khalil Herbert. So the local radio station in Chicago, the Score 670, is saying that Herbert will see more of a backfield share under offensive coordinator Luke Getsy. We also know that David Montgomery, was practicing kick returns, and that's very abnormal that we see a starting running back on kickoff returns in practice. It's very abnormal. So Herbert here, he could be in line for more work. There's no guarantee here, but going at running back 50, I think if you're going to get him in that range, and if he sees more work, even if he sees 8 to 10 carries a game, that might be a high-end number. But if he could see that many, he would have some standalone value that late in draft. I still think regardless with his talent, I still think at that point in the draft, I think he's somebody you stash. And, it's late enough where you're drafting him, where if he doesn't work out, you're not seeing him on the field through a couple games, you can drop him to the waiver wire and pick up somebody else. But I think there's some reasonable upside there. Marlon Max, the next one. He feels like he's back to his pre-injury form, and he had 1,000 or more scrimmage yards in 2018 and 2019, 4.7 and 4.4 yards per carry. So he was a good running back. Not elite, but great, very good. And Houston had the third toughest run schedule per Warren Sharp last year, and Warren Sharp projects them to be middle of the road. That's a big upgrade for them. Marlon Max seems to have the lead in terms of what I'm reading from Texans reports, but yet Mack is being drafted as running back 55, while rookie Dameon Pierce is being drafted as running back 40. I don't see anything in Pierce's athletic profile that tells me he is going to jump to the top of the heap quickly. Marlon Mack is a veteran, understands pass protection. He's been good. I think Marlon Mack has the lead on this job. I believe if he does play to his capability, he keeps the lead on this job. It's going to be a committee, of course. But at running back 55, yes, I would reach up to running back 50 for him and I've been getting him in a lot of drafts, and I think he could be a steal because he didn't catch a lot of balls in Indy, but he is a capable receiver, and he could be used in that part of the game as well. Last one for today. Peter King believes that Romeo Doubs of the Packers will have a prominent role early. He's a 4th-round rookie, 6'2", 204 out of Nevada's. In high-stakes drafts per Fantasy Mojo, in the last 3 days, he's gone as early as the first pick of the 12th round. Look, Aaron Rodgers is all about trust. And if Romeo Doubs, according to the practice reports, has been strong in the red zone, strong in the middle of